So, if I asked you to change the temperature of the room you're sitting in right now, you'd probably, reach for a thermostat or maybe open a window, right?
Yeah, you'd perform a physical action with your hands. That's just default human behavior.
Exactly. But we have a stack of deeply controversial, honestly, incredibly dense biophysical texts we're looking at today. And they suggest you shouldn't use your hand at all.
Right.
You should use your thoughts. And I don't mean that in a metaphorical, like, think cool thoughts kind of way. I mean, they claim to have the exact thermodynamic formula to prove that human intention can physically alter the atomic structure of the space around you.
It is a radical, radical departure from basically everything we're taught about the boundaries of the human body.
It really is.
Because, I mean, we are trained to view ourselves as closed mechanical systems, right?
Yeah.
You eat food, you burn calories, you exert physical force to move an object.
Right.
But this framework just strips all of that away entirely.
It totally dismantles it. We are going down a massive rabbit hole today for you, the learner, because we're talking about a collection of treatises with names like Cosmos Singulier, the ALAN Protocol, and the Codex of Spectral Harmony.
They sound intimidating, honestly.
Oh, highly intimidating.
Right.
And the mission of this deep dive is to take these concepts, which, let's be honest, sound incredibly esoteric, almost like science fiction or straight up mysticism, and anchor them in the core science they claim to represent.
Right, because they do claim to be hard science.
Exactly. So we are going to unpack the thermodynamics, the quantum physics, and the actual mechanics of how your personal frequency might literally be shaping the physical world.
And to do that, we kind of need to abandon our standard definitions of biology and physics. We're looking at the architecture of reality through three very specific lenses today.
Break those down for us.
Sure. So first is climate engineering,
Mhm.
then bioengineering, which they actually call the engineering of the living, and finally cosmic engineering.
Yeah.
So we have to start small, right, in our immediate physical surroundings, and then zoom all the way out to the structure of the universe itself.
Right. So let's start with the space immediately around us. The air in the room, the ground beneath our feet. This is what the texts refer to as l'ingénierie du climat, or, microclimate engineering.
Yeah.
And to really grasp this, we aren't looking at modern air conditioning units or like massive carbon scrubbers. The texts ground this entirely in something ancient, which really surprised me. Japanese rock gardens, the Karasansui.
It's a brilliant starting point, actually, because it completely recontextualizes something we universally view as purely aesthetic, or, at the most, a psychological tool for meditation.
Right. You look at a Zen garden and you just think, oh, how peaceful.
Exactly. When you look at a traditional Karasansui garden, you see this minimalist arrangement. It's carefully raked gravel, a few strategically placed rocks, maybe some moss if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But this framework analyzes the garden as a highly advanced piece of thermodynamic machinery. It's literal microclimate engineering operating on granular fluid dynamics.
Which completely shifts how you look at a pile of rocks. We're not talking about symbolism here. We're talking about heat exchange.
Precisely. So let's look at the gravel itself. The specific size of the grains and their high albedo, which is their capacity to reflect solar radiation well, they're not accidental.
Okay.
When you arrange millions of these stones, the microscopic roughness and the highly calculated spaces between the particles create a specific physical effect. They favor microconvection of the air.
Wait, so the air is actually moving differently because of the gravel?
Yes, as the sun hits the high albedo gravel, the heat isn't absorbed and trapped like it is in, say, dark asphalt in a city. It's reflected. And those tiny air pockets between the stones create these miniature convective currents.
Oh, wow.
So by simply existing, the garden actively mitigates heat islands. It physically cools the local microclimate through this continuous thermodynamic exchange.
So it's basically a passive cooling system for the environment. That is so cool. But the part that really caught my attention wasn't just the temperature control. It's what the patterns raked into the gravel are supposedly doing to the human brain.
Oh, the optical metamaterial.
Yes. Because you see those classic circular wave motifs radiating out around the larger rocks, right? And we're always told, oh, those represent ripples in water.
That's the poetic interpretation.
Huh.
But the biophysical interpretation of these texts is much more mechanical.
Yay.
The angle of repose, the exact steepness of those raked ridges dictates the stability of the patterns against wind and gravity, sure. But visually, these circular waves act as optical metamaterials.
Let's pause on optical metamaterials because that sounds like something out of a stealth bomber, not a Zen garden. A metamaterial manipulates electromagnetic waves, like light, in ways that don't occur naturally, right?
Exactly. It's about bending or guiding light. So think about the human eye. It is constantly making these rapid, involuntary movements called saccades.
Right, like jittering.
Yeah. Even when you think you are staring perfectly still at a fixed point, your eyes are microscopically darting around, scanning for new information. It's just an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Gotta watch out for predators, basically.
Exactly. But it also requires constant neurological processing. Your brain is continuously working to stitch these jittery images into a stable picture.
So your brain is basically rendering a video game environment in real time, constantly updating the frame rate.
Yes, that's a great analogy. And what these optical metamaterials in the gravel do, these concentric, highly structured geometric waves, is provide an external scaffolding for human vision.
External scaffolding, meaning it holds the eye in place.
Effectively, yes. By guiding the eye naturally toward points of singularity, which are the rocks, the geometry physically stabilizes those saccadic movements.
Yeah.
It arrests the jitter. And when the eye stops involuntarily searching, the neurological system of the observer is forced into a state of profound stasis. The garden uses the physical geometry of the environment to engineer the biological attention and the neural baseline of the human looking at it.
That is wild. The environment is literally hacking the nervous system.
It is.
So the ground beneath us is a thermodynamic and optical tool. But if we move from the ground to the air itself, this is where the framework gets completely radical. I mean, we walk around all day thinking of the air as just empty space, a void that we happen to move through.
Which is the fundamental misconception we have to dismantle to understand this model.
Right.
In this framework, the air is not a void. It is a high-density, highly complex informational fluid. It is a medium. The texts specifically highlight what they call the atmospheric pentad.
The atmospheric pentad, that's the 5 gases, right?
Yes. It's the specific mixture of nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen. Classical science just views this as, the breathable atmosphere.
Just the stuff we inhale.
Right. But this framework views the pentad as the substrate, the actual physical scaffolding through which all bioenergetic forces and human intentions travel.
It's like we're fish and we don't realize we're swimming in water. We just think it's nothingness. But this gaseous mixture is a fluid, and the most critical variable within this fluid medium is a concept they call humidience.
Yes, humidience.
Now, I want to unpack this carefully because humidience is not just another word for humidity. It's not about how frizzy your hair gets in the summer.
No, it's a massive conceptual leap. Classical humidity simply measures the volume of water vapor present in a given volume of air. It's a measure of saturation.
Right.
Humidience, however, treats that water vapor as a variable of conductivity. Because water is a dipole molecule, meaning it has a positive end and a negative end, it can align itself in response to electromagnetic fields.
Okay, so it has a charge.
Exactly. And the texts argue that the water vapor in the air acts as a literal superconductor for human intention, biophotonic emissions, and biological frequencies.
Okay, let me try an analogy here to see if I'm grasping the mechanics of this. Humidience sounds basically like the bandwidth of a Wi-Fi network, but for your nervous system.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So if you are trying to project a thought or an intention or even just achieve a deeply calm physiological state in a bone-dry room, it's like trying to stream a 4K movie on a 1990s dial-up connection.
Right, lots of buffering.
Exactly. The signal degrades instantly, it drops packets, it just doesn't travel because the air is an insulator. But if you have, say, 60 or 70% humidity, suddenly you have a fiber optic connection. The water molecules in the air become this high-speed, highly conductive conduit for your bioenergetic signal.
That is exactly the mechanism they are describing. The higher the humidience, the more pre-organized the local environment is.
Pre-organized.
Yeah, so when those dipole water molecules are abundant, they form a crystalline-like lattice in the air that requires significantly less metabolic and energetic output from the human operator to transmit a signal. The environment is already primed to carry the wave.
And to prove how this works, the texts offer a thought experiment, or maybe it's meant to be a literal experiment. It's hard to tell that it's just wildly specific.
Oh, the condensation protocol.
Yes. They outline the exact process of modulating a single liter of water from vapor to liquid. So forcing condensation out of thin air inside a standard 8-square-meter room using nothing but intention and atmospheric manipulation.
It requires immense, almost unfathomable precision. It is not remotely akin to like wishing for rain or doing a rain dance. It is a strict thermodynamic operation.
Okay, walk us through it.
First, the operator has to visualize a specific geometric architecture in their mind. They must construct a torus, basically a donut shape,
Right.
and it must be visualized in a highly specific radiant lavender
Oh,
color.
wait, hold on. Why a lavender donut? I mean, I get that we are dealing with esoteric biophysics here, but assigning a specific color and shape to condensed water sounds like we're crossing the line from physics straight into magic.
Yeah.
What is the actual mechanism there?
It's a fair question, and the texts do actually provide a mechanical rationale for it. The torus is chosen because topologically, it is a self-sustaining energetic shape.
Okay.
It creates a localized area of low informational pressure. Its function is to act as a vacuum, to suck up dispersed emanations in the room. The texts call this thermodynamic noise, or entropy essentially, chaotic heat signatures and random electromagnetic chatter.
So it's clearing the static, but why lavender?
The color lavender is critical because, in the visible light spectrum, violet and lavender reside at the highest frequencies, the shortest wavelengths. You are projecting a high-frequency geometric trap to gather the scattered chaotic energy in the room.
Okay, so the lavender torus acts like a high-frequency net gathering all the random static in the room. I can almost picture that, but gathering static isn't going to turn vapor into a physical drop of water. You still have to force those molecules to actually bond together.
Correct. You have to overcome the thermal agitation of the gas. And to do that, the operator must hold and project a very specific emotion. Gratitude.
And again, gratitude sounds like a psychology term, like something from a self-help book. But they treat it as physics.
Entirely as physics. The text does not treat gratitude as a fuzzy feel-good sentiment. It treats it as a measurable, mathematically precise frequency. Specifically, 52 terahertz, which the operator must visualize as a radiant azure blue.
52 terahertz. I mean, that is way beyond human hearing, way beyond basic radio waves. We're talking about the infrared terahertz gap in the electromagnetic spectrum, which is exactly where molecular vibrations happen.
Precisely. You're hitting the molecular level. In this framework, that specific 52 terahertz frequency acts as the cooling agent. It stabilizes the thermal agitation of the water molecules that were gathered by the torus.
So it literally freezes them in place.
Basically, by hitting the water vapor with this exact frequency, you are telling the molecules to stop vibrating chaotically. It allows the hydrogen bonds to perfectly align and reconstruct themselves, effectively pulling the vapor across the phase transition into a liquid state.
That is just, it's staggering to think about.
And the text makes a point to note that this specific azure blue frequency is necessary to overcome what they call telluric stress.
Telluric stress, meaning the natural magnetic disturbances and electromagnetic fields emanating from the Earth itself. So you're fighting the planet's baseline noise to condense this water.
Yes, you are overriding the default thermodynamic state of the environment by imposing a highly ordered, high-intensity frequency.
So in this model, condensation isn't just caused by a cold front moving in. It can be driven by informational extraction. You are literally imposing order on chaos using your bioenergetic field,
Right.
which shifts our entire understanding of climate from something we passively endure into something we are constantly actively interacting with. But I have to ask the obvious practical question here.
Go for it.
Measuring a frequency of gratitude sounds impossible without a specialized multi-million-dollar biophysics lab. Is this purely theoretical, or does this framework offer a way for someone to actually sense this atmospheric conductivity, this humidiance, in their own living room?
The texts anticipate that exact skepticism, actually. They acknowledge that while you can use standard hygrometers to measure physical moisture in the air, the measurement of actual humidiance, the conductivity of the space, relies entirely on the operator's physiological feedback.
Okay, so how do you measure it?
They call this the sonde integral, or the integral probe.
Meaning your own body is the sensor.
Exactly. Because the human body is composed primarily of highly structured water, it acts as the ultimate resonant antenna. You don't need a laboratory because your own nervous system is constantly reading the room.
So what are you looking for?
Your skin's thermoreceptors, the subtle shifts in your resting heart rate, your galvanic skin response. These are all indicators. The texts argue that when the environment reaches a state of coherence, which is their term for perfect spectral and thermodynamic tuning, you will physically feel it.
What does it feel like?
The ambient air becomes perfectly conductive. When that happens, the physical and mental effort required to maintain focus, to hold an intention, drops to near zero. You feel a distinct, profound lack of resistance.
Like walking with a heavy backpack and suddenly someone lifts it off your shoulders, the friction of the environment just disappears.
That's a great way to put it.
And that makes perfect sense within this logic, because if the water in the air around us is acting as a highly conductive medium for these frequencies, it stands to reason that the water inside us is doing the exact same thing.
Naturally.
Which brings us perfectly into the second major lens of this framework: l'ingénierie du vivant, or bioengineering, and the cellular matrix. We are moving from the 8-square-meter room right through the skin and down to the atomic level of our biology.
And just as they fundamentally redefined the air we breathe from empty space to an informational fluid, they completely redefine the food we eat.
Right.
This framework presents a thermodynamic and quantum dynamic model of nutrition that entirely discards classical dietetics.
Throw out every calorie-counting app you have on your phone, seriously.
They are completely irrelevant here. In this model, nutrition is not a combustion engine. It is not about burning physical matter for thermal heat. It is entirely about managing atomic quarks, photons, and electromagnetic signatures.
Okay, break that down for me.
Every single piece of food you put into your body is defined by the texts as a station of energetic data.
A station of energetic data. So let's make this tangible. If I eat a standard sugar crystal, or like a slice of bread, what am I actually eating according to this physics model?
You are literally ingesting solar photons that have been trapped in covalent carbon bonds.
Wait, actual sunlight?
Yes. The texts view the process of photosynthesis not just as a standard chemical reaction, but as what they call a theurgic act.
The theurgic act.
It is the encapsulation, the physical trapping of the sun's photonic flow into dense matter. So digestion is not the mechanical breaking down of carbohydrates and proteins with stomach acid.
It's not just a blender in your stomach.
No, digestion is an informational extraction process. Your body is unlocking those carbon bonds to release that trapped solar fire, transferring that photonic energy to power your nervous system and your cellular matrix.
That is an epic way to view breakfast. I mean, you aren't eating toast, you are cracking open microscopic vaults of starlight.
It's very poetic, but they mean it quite literally.
Right. But the texts get incredibly granular with this. They don't just talk about the body as a whole big machine. They define the individual cell as the ultimate unit of consciousness. And they use this incredibly dense term, microflumiégie.
Yeah, it's a portmanteau.
Yeah.
It breaks down to microflux light energy. To understand the scale of what we're engineering here, you have to look at the number.
Look at the numbers on this.
The average human body contains roughly 37 trillion cells. Inside a single standard eukaryotic cell, there are about 100,000 different proteins constantly interacting, folding, and transmitting data. The texts model the entire human organism not as a biological machine, but as a biological particle accelerator.
A biological particle accelerator. That implies immense speed and pressure.
And precision. It is a highly pressurized stoichiometric reactor. In chemistry, stoichiometry is the calculation of reactants and products in a chemical reaction. It requires perfect balance.
Right.
The texts argue that to maintain consciousness and health, this human reactor must strictly maintain a resting potential of national 70 millivolts across its cellular membranes.
Let's translate that national 70 millivolts, because that's a real biological measurement.
It is.
That's the electrical charge of a neuron at rest, governed by the sodium-potassium pump. It's the baseline tension required for a cell to be ready to fire, to transmit a signal. If it drops too low, the cell is dead. If it's too high, it's overstimulated and burns out.
Exactly. It is the razor's edge of biological stability.
Yep.
And to maintain that exact national 70 millivolts across 37 trillion cells, you need the right raw materials. You cannot build a particle accelerator out of cheap parts.
Makes sense.
This brings us to a massive component of the texts, the ALAN protocol architecture de liaison et d'ancrage nutritionnel.
The nutritional anchoring and linking architecture.
Yes. Within this protocol, they outline a hyperspecific molecular formula intended for optimal tissue repair and frequency maintenance. They call it the complex de réparation, the repair complex.
Okay, let's break down this recipe, because it assigns specific Hertz frequencies to basic elements, which is fascinating to me.
The recipe requires 4 specific components acting in perfect thermodynamic concert. First, you have water. In this complex, water acts as the matrix, the foundational support structure, and it must vibrate at 780 hertz.
To 780 hertz. Okay.
Second, you have oxygen. Oxygen acts as the catalyst, the flux that drives the reaction, operating at 1260 hertz.
So water is the canvas, oxygen is the brush, but the next two are where it gets really interesting.
Right. Third is zinc. Zinc is categorized as the informational lock, vibrating at 3.2 kilohertz. And finally, carbon. Carbon acts as the memory, the ultimate stabilizer of the new, healthy cellular state.
I love this because it sounds exactly like computer engineering.
It really does.
I mean, water and oxygen are doing the active processing, the physical building, but zinc acts as the lock, like hitting save on a document. It locks the new structural data into place.
Yes, exactly.
And carbon is the hard drive itself. It holds the memory of that repaired state, so the cell doesn't just revert back to being damaged. The zinc and the carbon aren't just minerals you take in a multivitamin. They are code that tells your biological quantum computer to save its progress.
That is a highly accurate synthesis of their function. You are updating the software of your biological matrix. But to ensure this software patch actually installs correctly, the ALAN protocol introduces incredibly strict dietary constraints to maintain the required resonance.
Right. If you're upgrading your system, you can't introduce malware. The texts explicitly ban a category of foods they call atomic disruptors.
Yes, atomic disruptors.
And the list is very specific. Eggs, peanuts, and crustaceans. Crabs, shrimp, that sort of thing. They argue these must be completely avoided, and you should substitute them with things like flax seeds because the omega-3 builds the myelin sheath around the nerves to improve conductivity, and pumpkin seeds, which are naturally high in zinc, to provide those informational locks.
This brings us to a crucial philosophical and physical cornerstone of the text, the thermodynamics of life. Specifically, how the living body interacts with the second principle of thermodynamics.
Entropy.
Yes. The second principle dictates that all closed systems inevitably degrade. Entropy, or chaos, always increases. Mountains crumble, iron rusts, heat dissipates. Chaos wins.
Eventually, always.
Always. The living, breathing body is a localized rebellion against this law. It is constantly fighting decay. And according to this framework, the only way a biological organism survives is by continuously importing highly ordered external structures to neutralize its internal chaos.
So, importing the geometric purity of crystallized sugar or the highly structured frequencies of zinc and water to fight off the degradation of the cells.
Exactly. Food is an informational patch that maintains your frequency partition. It keeps you functioning at the top of the cosmological edifice. If you consume a disruptor, you are willfully importing chaos.
The system crashes.
Right. The negative 70 millivolt resting potential collapses. The cellular membrane loses its tension, and disease begins to manifest.
Okay, let's pause here because I need to ask a critical question about these atomic disruptors. I read the sections banning eggs, peanuts, and crustaceans, and my immediate thought was, are we sure a peanut is truly disrupting my protonic conductivity and my quantum atomic resonance? Or is this framework just taking a standard, well-documented biological peanut allergy and dressing it up in a highly poetic quantum physics skin?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. I mean, an allergic reaction does cause systemic inflammation, hives, anaphylaxis. That is the definition of biological chaos.
Yeah.
Are they just overcomplicating a basic histamine reaction?
It's a very sharp critique, and it strikes at the core of how these texts interpret biology. Yes, on a purely allopathic physiological level, peanuts and crustaceans are among the most common allergens. They trigger IgE-mediated immune responses, massive histamine release, and absolute cellular chaos.
Which we know. We can measure that in a standard lab.
Exactly. Classical medicine stops there. The protein is the trigger, the histamine is the result. However, this bioenergetic framework asks why. Why do those specific proteins trigger that response in the human machine?
And their answer isn't just because the immune system made a mistake.
No. They argue the mechanism is fundamentally electromagnetic. The text suggests that the specific atomic weight, the density, and the resonance of the proteins found in crustaceans and peanuts literally physically block protonic conductivity in specific ion channels, specifically the K2P channels, the potassium leak channels that help maintain that negative 70 leave potential.
Oh, wow. So they're physically plugging the quantum holes.
Precisely. So in this model, the allergic reaction, the histamine, the inflammation is not the root cause. It is merely the biological symptom of a much deeper, purely mathematical frequency mismatch between the human operator's baseline resonance and the food's atomic signature.
So the body is just sounding an alarm.
Yes. The immune system is reacting to a massive dissonance in the data stream. It's like plugging a 220-volt appliance into a 110-volt outlet. The sparks in the fire are just the symptoms of incompatible energetic architectures.
That reframes the entire concept of diet. It's not about fuel, it's about frequency compatibility, but this raises a major practical issue.
Which is?
Knowing this molecular recipe, water, oxygen, zinc, carbon, is kind of useless if you don't know how to actually execute it. I mean, if my cells are basically quantum receivers waiting for data, how do I physically bridge the gap between my mind, my intention, and these cellular structures? How do I broadcast the signal?
That is the crux of the entire philosophy. Everything we've discussed so far, the climate engineering of the room, the cellular engineering of the body, is all just preparing the hardware.
Yeah.
Getting the machine ready.
Exactly. Now we have to look at the software execution. This leads us into the mechanics of modulation, how we actually bridge mind and matter.
And the texts don't just offer vague advice like, focus your thoughts. They provide a literal, strict mathematical formula for this bridge. They call it the configuration mare, or the mother configuration.
The master formula for applied intention physics.
Right. And the equation is action equals m times c times f, and all of that is propelled by, or divided by, pi. So action mx cxf pi. I want to spend some real time unpacking this, variable by variable, because this is the engine of the entire framework.
Let's start with the multipliers inside the parentheses. The first variable is m, which stands for matrix, or matrix. We've already explored this deeply. This is the humidiance.
The conductivity.
Yes.
Yeah.
It represents the purity, the conductivity, and the structural integrity of the water substrate, both in the atmospheric air of the room and in the cellular fluid of your body.
So M is the quality of the highway the signal has to travel on. If you are dehydrated or sitting in a dry, static-filled room, your M is incredibly low.
Exactly. A polluted or chaotic matrix fragments the bioenergetic signal almost instantly. The signal can't get through.
Okay, what's next?
The second variable is C, which stands for champ, or field. This relates to the atmospheric pentad we discussed earlier, but practically it represents geometric confinement.
Geometric confinement, meaning what exactly? Like a physical box.
Imagine trying to fill a room with light using a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The light scatters equally in all directions. It's diffuse, it's weak. Now imagine putting a highly reflective cone around that bulb, focusing all the light into a single, intense beam.
Like a spotlight.
Right. That is geometric confinement. In this framework, C is the localized electromagnetic funnel created by the environment or the operator's visualization, like that lavender torus we talked about earlier, that prevents your energetic output from dissipating into the background entropy of the universe. It contains and focuses the force.
So M is the highway, C is the guardrails keeping the signal on the road, and then we have F, which stands for frequency or conference.
This is the spectral tuning.
Yeah.
It is the exact vibrational match between you, the operator, and your target.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all energy?
No, not at all. If you are trying to heal a specific organ or condense a water droplet, you cannot just project generic energy. You have to match the resonant frequency of the target matter. It is the 52 terahertz of gratitude or the 3.2 kilohertz of zinc. If F is mismatched, the data just bounces off the target.
Okay, so we have the matrix, the confinement, and the frequency. These three are multiplied together, but they are passive. They are just the setup, right?
Right.
The actual engine driving this equation is the final variable, pi. The texts call this intention pressure.
Pi is the active kinetic vector. It is the actual exertion of consciousness. And the texts break pi down into three distinct subcomponents: proportion, magnitude, and length.
Let's define those because they seem crucial. Proportion is the width or the scope of the signal. Like, are you targeting a single cell or an entire room?
Yes. And magnitude is the amplitude, the sheer raw power and emotional force of the intention.
And length is exactly what it sounds like: duration. How long can you sustain the exact frequency without your mind wandering or your nervous system fatiguing?
Precisely. When you multiply the environmental humidiance M, the geometric confinement C, and the perfect spectral frequency F, and you push all of that through the sustained kinetic vector of intention pressure pi, the texts claim you achieve literal physical modulation of matter.
This is what you meant earlier by taking meditation out of the realm of psychology and placing it into thermodynamics. Intention is treated as a physical kinetic force.
It is a force.
But it is a force that requires a biophysical substrate to latch onto. Without the zinc, without the conductive water, the intention is just a ghost. It has nothing to grab.
And because this intention is a physical force interacting with matter, it inevitably leaves a footprint, which introduces two of the more controversial concepts in the texts: psychometry and anticipatory resonance.
Now, psychometry is usually treated as a psychic parlor trick, right? The idea that you can hold an antique watch and feel the emotions of its previous owner, but this framework grounds it in electromagnetics.
Yes. If we accept the premise that every thought and intense emotion emits a measurable biophotonic and electromagnetic signature, then highly charged biological events must leave a residue in the local environment.
It's just basic physics. Energy doesn't disappear, it transfers.
Exactly. Psychometry in this model is simply the bioenergetic equivalent of dusting for fingerprints. The operator trains their nervous system, their integral probe, to act as a highly sensitive antenna capable of reading these residual waveforms trapped in the molecular lattice of a room or an object.
So you aren't reading ghosts, you're reading residual thermal and magnetic data. And anticipatory resonance takes this even further. It's the idea that you can detect a disease or a disharmony in the frequency field before it physically manifests.
It's akin to hearing a wrong, discordant note being played by a violinist in an orchestra long before the instrument's string actually snaps.
That's a great way to think of it.
Classical allopathic medicine is largely reactive. It waits for the ulcer to form in the stomach lining or the tumor to calcify in the tissue. It waits for the physical damage to be visible on the X-ray.
Right. By the time it's matter, it's already late in the game.
Exactly. This framework suggests that the disease exists as a chaotic frequency disruption in the bioenergetic field long before it condenses into physical tissue damage. If an operator can read the anticipatory resonance, if they can detect the drop in the NETSIM 70 millivolt baseline, they can theoretically apply the configuration MER to correct the frequency before the physical damage ever occurs.
It is pure preventative bioengineering.
It is.
But let's deal with reality here for a second. What happens when the damage has occurred? What happens when a person, or even a biological system, is stuck in a deeply ingrained, chronically disharmonic state, like a severe illness or deep trauma? You can't just gently nudge a system that is that locked in.
Well, you can.
And the texts offer a very specific, aggressive intervention for this called the saisie de surprise, or the surprise seizure.
It's a fascinating mechanism. When a biological or energetic system remains in a state of chronic disease or trauma for a long time, it achieves a kind of morbid stability. The body adapts to the chaos and accepts it as the new baseline.
It gets used to being sick.
Yes, it gets locked into a bad frequency partition. If you try to introduce a gentle, healing frequency, the system's guardrails will actually reject it to maintain its current, albeit broken, stasis.
It defends its own illness.
Yes. The saisie de surprise is a technique designed to bypass those defenses.
Yeah.
The operator introduces a sudden, massive, entirely unexpected data point, a shock of intense sensory or energetic input to shatter that morbid stability.
So it's a shock to the system.
It overwhelms the nervous system's capacity to predict the environment. For a split second, the system drops its current frequency partition. It enters a state of blank suspension. And in that microsecond of suspension, the operator injects the new, healthy frequency.
I instantly thought of a smartphone when I read this part. If your phone completely freezes on a glitchy app, tapping the screen gently does absolutely nothing. The software is locked in a bad loop.
Right, it just ignores the input.
Exactly. You can't just ask it to load a new page. You have to perform an abrupt physical intervention. You hold down the power and the volume buttons simultaneously for 10 seconds. It's a saisie de surprise for the hardware. It abruptly cuts the power, shatters the frozen loop, and clears the cached errors so the operating system can reload from a clean baseline.
That is precisely the mechanism. You are forcibly clearing the bioenergetic cache of the human system.
But let me look closely at the mathematical strictness of that master formula again. Action mx CXF pi, because it is a multiplication equation. If one of those passive variables is 0, the whole thing crashes, right?
Yes.
So if my humidiance, the purity of my water matrix, is fundamentally compromised, say I am severely dehydrated, exhausted, and sitting in a highly toxic, zero humidity environment, does that mean my intention has absolutely zero physical impact, regardless of how much magnitude and effort I pour into my intention pressure, my pi?
According to the strict interpretation of the configuration MER, yes, any number multiplied by 0 is 0. Now, biologically, humidiance is never absolutely 0 while you're still alive, but if it is severely compromised, the signal fragments the moment it leaves the source.
Yeah.
If you have no confinement C, the energy immediately disperses into the background entropy of the room.
So sheer willpower is basically useless.
It is entirely insufficient. You can possess immense intention pressure. You can meditate with incredible focus and emotional force. But without the proper biophysical substrate, without the conductive environment and the cellular locks like zinc, you are essentially screaming into a vacuum. The physics simply aren't there to carry the wave.
Wow.
This formula explains why so many intention-based, meditative, or energetic healing practices yield incredibly inconsistent results in the real world. They rely entirely on psychology and willpower and completely fail to account for the physical thermodynamics of the environment and the cellular matrix.
So we have to engineer the climate of the room, and we have to chemically engineer ourselves with atomic locks, just to have a fighting chance at our intention making a dent in reality.
Yes.
It requires microscopic, honestly exhausting precision. But the staggering thing about these texts is that they do not stop at the edge of the human body or the walls of that 8-square-meter room.
No, they keep going.
To truly understand why this system operates the way it does, we have to zoom all the way out. We have to look at the architectural framework of the universe itself. This brings us to the final massive concept: Ingénierie du cosmos, cosmic engineering, and the singular universe.
We are moving directly into the philosophy of the text Cosmos Singulier, and here we encounter the fundamental laws of the cosmos according to this framework. It's important to understand that this isn't just physics anymore, it's a unified theory of existence.
Right.
The primary axiom laid out in these texts is breathtaking in its scale.
The fundamental right of existence.
Yes, the axiom states, every unit, regardless of scale, age, force, or mass, has the fundamental right to recognize itself and be recognized as worthy of existence, and to project its future existence.
That is incredibly heavy. I mean, it assigns a moral, conscious, and biophysical weight to literally everything, from a single quark to a carbon atom to a human being all the way up to a galaxy. It claims that existence itself is an active projection.
It does. And to support a universe where every atom is constantly projecting its right to exist, the texts have to completely redefine space, time, and geometry.
How so?
Well, in classical everyday thought, we treat these as human abstractions. We treat time as a clock we invented to measure our days. We treat geometry as a grid we mentally place over reality to measure a room. But Cosmos Singulier argues that space, time, and geometry are the literal, dynamic, physical fabric of reality. They are biological properties of the cosmos, not concepts.
And because geometry is a physical property, human relationships are essentially geometric configurations within that cosmic fabric. The way humans interact isn't just social, it's thermodynamic.
Yes, exactly.
The text gives a very tangible, real-world manifestation of this cosmic geometry through a concept it calls the triplet of oscillators.
This is where the macrocosm meets the human scale. The premise is that an individual human is powerful, but inherently limited by their single energetic baseline. However, when three distinct biological systems, three people unite with a common, perfectly tuned intention, they form a geometric triplet.
And the texts use 3 specific human profiles to explain how this engine works, right? Linda, Jimmy, and Alan.
Yes.
Let's look at the mechanics of these 3, because it's fascinating how their different psychological and biological profiles fit together like puzzle pieces.
Let's start with Linda. Linda represents the fluid, high-frequency sensor. Biologically and energetically, she acts as a high-gain antenna. She operates at a very high-frequency partition, which makes her highly sensitive to weak, subtle environmental signals.
So she's picking up on the anticipatory resonance.
Exactly. She picks up on minute fluctuations in the field, anticipatory resonances, things that others just completely miss. But a high-gain antenna has a major vulnerability. It is easily overwhelmed by noise and static. She can pull the signal down, but she can't anchor it without burning out.
Which is why the circuit requires Jimmy.
Exactly. Jimmy is the anchor. He operates on a vastly different baseline, a low-frequency, highly stable, dense partition. He is the ground wire.
Right.
He doesn't pick up the subtle signals Linda does, but he possesses immense bioenergetic inertia. He absorbs overloads, provides structural stability to the group, and prevents the high-frequency energy from spinning into chaos or shattering the system.
So Linda catches the lightning and Jimmy grounds it into the earth so the house doesn't explode.
Precisely. But grounded energy is just static potential. It needs to be directed. Finally, we have Alan.
The modulator.
Yes, Alan is the modulator and the architect. He sits between the two extremes. He takes the high-frequency raw data that Linda pulls from the ether, he grounds it through Jimmy's thermodynamic stability, and he translates those signals into constructive, directed action. Alan is the one executing the configuration error.
This triplet is literally an advanced electrical circuit. It's like building a high-end stereo system. Linda is the antenna on the roof, pulling in the radio waves from the atmosphere. Jimmy is the heavy copper grounding wire buried deep in the dirt, absorbing the power surges. And Alan is the processor, the receiver in the living room, taking that raw, chaotic static and running it through the algorithms to turn it into a clear, beautiful song playing out of the speakers.
That is a perfect synthesis of their dynamics. They form a complete energetic loop. And what is crucial to understand here is the math of the triplet.
The multiplier effect.
Right. When these three act together in conference, their potentials do not merely add up. 1 plus 1 plus 1 does not equal 3 in this framework. Because they form a closed, resonant geometric structure, their potentials multiply via thermodynamic resonance. The output is exponentially greater than the sum of the parts.
And this incredible multiplier effect operates under a cosmic law mentioned in the texts called the VOWN law, all right?
Yes. The VOWN law is introduced as the overarching metrological constant of the universe. It is the mathematical and geometric framework that stabilizes these massive bioenergetic transmissions across the cosmos.
So it protects the signal.
It ensures that when a fully aligned triplet projects an intention and action, the signal does not degrade as it moves through space and time. It allows human intention to interface directly with the macro structure of the universe.
So if we connect this to the ultimate big picture, the grand overarching takeaway of Cosmos Singulier is that the universe is not a dead, empty, cold void full of random collisions. It is a highly conscious, deeply dynamic structure that is literally observing itself, measuring itself, and restructuring itself through living organisms. We aren't just living in the cosmos, we are the cosmos engaging in active self-engineering.
We are the nerve endings of the universe.
Which is profoundly beautiful, but I have to bring us back down to Earth with a highly practical question.
Okay, what is it?
We are talking about human beings here. Linda, Jimmy, and Alan are people. If this cosmic comparence, this multiplier effect, requires such absolute perfect geometric, biophysical, and emotional alignment, how does a group of humans actually maintain it? Because everyday stressors exist.
Life is entropic.
Exactly. Sitting in an hour of bumper-to-bumper traffic, getting a highly stressful email from your boss, fighting off a common cold, simply not getting 8 hours of sleep. These things inevitably physically disrupt an individual's baseline frequency. So if Jimmy has a terrible Tuesday and his low-frequency anchor turns into chaotic, frustrated static, does the whole cosmic circuit blow a fuse? Does the math break?
It is the most realistic, glaring vulnerability of the entire system, and the texts do not ignore it. They address this human frailty through the absolute necessity of what they call stasis protocols.
Stasis protocols.
Yes. Human fallibility is a thermodynamic reality. Entropy is constantly trying to penetrate the biological system. This is precisely why the ALAN protocol's dietary restrictions, the zinc, the carbon, and the environmental engineering of humidians are not viewed as optional lifestyle choices in this framework.
They aren't wellness trends.
They are mandatory mechanical maintenance. When Jimmy hits that traffic jam, his metabolic and emotional noise spikes. His 70 millivolt baseline fluctuates. If the triplet tries to operate in that state, the multiplier effect collapses back into individual isolated addition. The signal degrades into background noise.
And they have to fix it.
Right. To prevent this, the triplet must immediately recognize the dissonance. They must employ a seize de surprise, a radical reset to clear Jimmy's cache. They must reestablish the environmental conference. In this framework, maintenance of the self is quite literally maintenance of the cosmos. If the components aren't perfectly tuned, the universe stops observing itself clearly through them.
Maintenance of the self is maintenance of the cosmos. That is a staggering responsibility to place on the act of just taking care of your own biology. Well, I want to thank you for acting as the Alan, the modulator, for today's incredibly dense material. You've taken these massive cosmological and quantum equations and grounded them so we could actually grasp the mechanisms behind them.
It is always a pleasure to align our frequencies and explore the architecture of these ideas.
So let's briefly trace the massive arc of this journey we've just been on. We started by looking at the ground, realizing that raking a Japanese gravel garden isn't just art. It physically manipulates thermal fluid dynamics and stabilizes the human nervous system through optical metamaterials.
Right.
We moved into the air, redefining empty space as a highly conductive fluid where humidians acts as a fiber optic cable for intention. Then we zoomed into the 37 trillion cells of the human body, looking at how treating food as quantum data using specific frequencies of zinc and carbon can lock healing codes right into our cellular matrix to fight off thermodynamic entropy.
Which is just incredible.
We broke down the master formula of applied intention physics, proving that sheer willpower is useless without humidity and geometric confinement. And finally, we expanded all the way out to the cosmos, seeing how human relationships function as multiplying thermodynamic circuits that allow the universe to consciously engineer itself.
It is a breathtakingly complete model. From the microconvection of a tiny pebble to the macro resonance of a galaxy, it offers a unified theory of bioenergetic existence.
It really does. And I want to leave you, our learner, with a final provocative thought based on these texts, something to really chew on as you go about the rest of your day.
I love this part.
The sources explicitly state that every single exhalation of human breath contains metabolic water vapor. And as we've established today, water is the ultimate programmable matrix. That vapor you are exhaling right now has been physically encoded with your current biological and emotional constant.
Your exact frequency in this exact moment.
Exactly. So if intention and frequency physically travel through this conductive humidiance, you are never just breathing out empty air. You are literally physically terraforming the emotional and bioenergetic climate of your living room, your office, and your city with every single breath you take. You are altering the matrix of the space around you continuously. So the question you have to ask yourself today is, what kind of climate are you building right now?
That's a powerful thought.
Because ultimately, we aren't just existing in the world anymore. We are swimming in incredibly dense, highly conductive waters, and we are the ones making the waves. Stay curious, keep exploring your own frequencies, and thank you for joining us on this deep dive.